On this special edition of Independent Sources, the Year in Review. Happy New Year and welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Pierre-Pierre.
And I'm Vianora Vinca. Over the next half hour, we'll highlight a few of our favorite stories from 2012.
We'll start off with the city's homeless issue. Every night there are 40,000 or more people in the city's homeless shelters. That figure represents only the tip of the iceberg, not accounting for those huddled under cardboard roofs or hidden in the shadows of the underground.
The elderly are becoming a particularly at-risk percentage of that population. Many are becoming homeless because the city's increasing cost of living is too much for their retirement checks to cover. Judith Escalona profiled Arvanetta Henry, a woman who looked forward to retirement but found herself living in a shelter.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to go in here to change so I can get ready for tonight.
Arvanetta Henry is 63 years old and homeless. Every day she rises early in the morning to be out of the Jamaica Next Step shelter by 7 a.m. and to return by 8 p.m.
I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning so I can go take a shower without the company of other people. And I'm out of the building at 6:45. And then I go to church and I head back. Sometimes I'm late. I lose my bed.
Henry wasn't always homeless. She is a former public school teacher who saw her middle-class life slip through her fingers when her husband became ill.
He's in a nursing home. Medical expense and everything. The mortgage, it wasn't our mortgage, but we were staying in a house. And the mortgage was not being paid. And we didn't know this. And the next thing we know, the landlord was in foreclosure.
That began her downward slide. With savings depleted, Henry clung to her job, hoping to find an apartment she could afford. She sought help from the city and was sent to the shelter in Queens, away from the Bronx where she has lived and worked her entire life.
I was informed that it was a working shelter, that people that work for the city would go there. So this way they would be with population of their means and so forth. And when I arrived, the staff developer told me that it was a punishment shelter for clients that were non-compliant.
That was 4 years ago. Henry's job was her last grip on the life she once knew.
I ended up having to stop teaching because they insist that I go get public assistant. And I kept saying, I do not want public assistant. And they said, well, Miss Henry, if you don't get public assistant, you are what we call non-compliance.
She signed up for welfare and landed a low-paying job through its work program, WEB, the Work Experience Program, better known as Workfare. She didn't qualify.
The director of the WEB program stood in front of my caseworker and told him, she's too old. I said, what? You, Miss Henry, you are over 55, and the city cannot have you working. I said, I need to go to work. I need something to do.
At the Jamaica Next Step shelter, she's had to adjust to stringent house rules.
I was informed that I couldn't use the elevator. I'm over 60. That doesn't matter. Only people that use the elevator is the staff.
But the clients themselves present a challenge to the elderly. Henry has been harassed and robbed by them.
I have been intimidated by the clients. I've had an altercation because the client figured that I was old and I wouldn't stand up.
Jobless and homeless, Arvinetta Henry is still hopeful. At Picture the Homeless, an advocacy group for the homeless located in the Bronx, Henry has found a safe haven and is reclaiming her self-worth by helping other homeless people. I'm Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
We've talked a lot about the problem of food access in the city. It's an issue that really cannot be overstated when 1 in every 6 people is food insecure. That means they're not sure where their next meal is coming from.
In this next piece, Marlene Peralta profiled an urban farming project in East New York, where some residents were growing healthier food options.
This particular planting is a plant that you know if you're a true farmer.
Okay.
This is.
Colleen Alsop learned to farm back home in Guyana. He harvests these kinds of vegetables in one of the unlikeliest places, in the heart of Brooklyn, at the East New York farm.
My backyard home in the same community, I get so much of thing growing there, cabbage, get squash, if you see squash, right in the people, and people was living there, and they know that the little space they could use. And right now, they're shocked.
Several gardens in the area were started by immigrants like Alsop. Many of them come from southern states, the Caribbean, and Latin America.
East New York is a community that doesn't necessarily have a lot of access to fresh fruits and vegetables, but it also has a pretty strong agricultural tradition. And so there were already a lot of community gardens in this neighborhood when this project started.
The East New York Farm is just one of the many farming initiatives started by community-based organizations and local residents in poor neighborhoods around New York. Farming is the response to address the lack of access to fresh fruits and vegetables.
We like to grow the produce that people want to eat that they can't necessarily find in the stores, or if they can find it, it's not going to be local and organic. A lot of those crops are West Indian crops, so bitter melon, long beans, okra. We also grow a lot of different kinds of greens, collard greens, kale, Swiss chard, a lot of peppers, eggplant.
Although urban gardening in New York City is not new, experts say its popularity has grown due to the increasing campaigns to support community gardens and the number of innovative urban agriculture projects that are popping up. This is at a time when more than half of all New Yorkers and nearly 40% of public school students are obese or overweight.
New York City has one of the biggest urban agriculture systems in the country. We have about 500 community gardens, about 80% of them actually grow food. And NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, has about 600 community gardens, and most of those also grow food. And so we've already got a huge infrastructure for urban agriculture.
Just across the river in East Harlem, Gina Kidley, a chef by profession, brought her nonprofit program Nourishing NYC to an already established community garden to educate locals about healthy eating alternatives.
All of the Nourishing NYC programs are all free, especially in East Harlem. It's a low-income area. It has the most density of obesity and diabetes in all of Manhattan. So it's a really in-need community. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. We looked at what programs work.
Keatley says that living in an urban setting with little open space doesn't prevent New Yorkers from growing their own food.
Even if you don't have a big plot of dirt, you can do it in your housing, in your apartment, and it gets people to realize, I can grow something. You know, this is exciting, I can do it. This is what basil looks like coming out of, the ground, and it connects them to food, it's a big gap that's kind of missing in this community. People don't understand what food is like when it's not in a box.
We'll never be able to grow enough food in New York City to feed people, but it can be a huge help. So in low-income neighborhoods, certainly people are growing enough food to improve their diets.
The success of urban agriculture in New York City is such that programs like the United Way of New York City's Seed Grant is providing funds for them. And even the New York City Department of Environmental Protection is becoming involved to help its expansion. For Independent Sources, I am Marlene Peralta.
Greenpoint, Brooklyn has been a Polish enclave in the city for several years, so much so that it's called Little Poland. We saw that starting to change last year, as at least one well-known business in the neighborhood closed and some Poles moved away.
Zyphus LeBrun reported on why the neighborhood was changing.
This stretch of Manhattan Avenue in Greenpoint, Brooklyn has always been a hub for Polish businesses. Whether it's to buy a link of kielbasa or a loaf of babka, Poles have come from as far away as New Jersey and Long Island to get a slice of home.
One of the many businesses on the block is Poland International Meat. The store has been here since 1995, catering to its customers with meat and other food imported from Europe. Lucina Wierzbicki and her husband Zino own this store and another branch a block away. She has seen business decline somewhat in the last year.
At the beginning, was very good. Now it's a little bit different because the Polish people, I don't know, they moved to the other state or they back to Poland,
Poland International is one of the businesses having to revamp itself to meet the needs of the growing white American population moving into the neighborhood.
We make the sausage, we make the hams, we make everything. We sell the hot food also. We try to sell the Polish food also, because I know the American people like the Polish food and American food.
Her business is still doing relatively well compared to Staropolski Deli a few blocks south. They closed recently because the owners could no longer afford the rent. Margaret Mlodnika has been a resident in the area for nearly 22 years. She was disappointed to see the deli go, as well as her favorite card store.
I think it was the one that has now videos, the green awning right behind Old Poland Baker. I think that's the store. That was the. Makes me feel sad, of course. I don't want that to happen. I don't mind anybody else to move here, but I want Polish people to stay here because I feel good when they are here.
One community leader, though, is welcoming the change. Christopher Olachowski is the chairman of Community Board No. 1 in Greenpoint. He says the recent store closures and exodus should not be overblown. He explains that it's a transient population who can no longer afford to live in the neighborhood, not those who own property and are invested in the community.
Since maybe 2004, 2005, subsequent to that, when the residential units started to come up on the waterfront, that's really started to have an impact on the changes taking place right now in this community. But to say that, on the one hand, certain groups of this ethnic community can no longer live here, doesn't mean that the ethnic community is being disenfranchised or marginalized for that matter.
The consensus is that Poles very much want to be stakeholders in the changing community. Olachowski says that at least one developer, Belvedere Partners, wants the community to retain its Polish identity and flavor.
And he's talking about having some part of Greenpoint be made into a Polish village. Let's have a Polish village so that when people come, they can get a better understanding of the culture, the culinary samplings and the traditions of this Polish community.
Still, that's not totally comforting for someone as invested as Lucina Wierzbicki.
Wierzbicki says that if the business continues to go south within the next 5 to 7 years, that they too may go south to Florida, where they have a home near a large Polish community. Reporting from Greenpoint, Brooklyn, Zyphus LeBrun, Independent Sources.
We'll take a break right now. When we come back, we enter West Africa on this special year-end review edition of Independent Sources. Thanks for staying tuned to a special edition of Independent Sources.
We covered a lot of local issues on the show this past year and also covered a number of international stories that affect immigrant communities here in the city.
We dedicated 2 full shows to our Enter West Africa series. Abby Ishola produced several segments focused on the pressing environmental and economic issues in Nigeria and Ghana.
Abby's first piece highlighted the double-edged sword of China's influence in Ghana. On one hand, China has pumped millions into the country's economy, but has also hurt the local textile market with knockoff prints.
Gideon Ashiagbor's future at his job hangs in the balance. After 10 years of working at Akosombo Textiles Limited in Ghana, the 33-year-old married father of 2 is one of thousands of textile workers in jeopardy of being laid off.
If the factory closed down, personally, it would be hell for me. Because I'm a textile technician, that's my field.
Akosombo Textiles Limited, or ATL, is one of 4 remaining textile factories in Ghana that produces the country's iconic wax prints. In the mid-70s, there were 40 factories that employed over 25,000 people. Today, there are less than 3,000 employees throughout the industry. The textile trade here has suffered for 2 main reasons. One is the sale of secondhand clothing from overseas. Then there's the major threat of pirated prints being smuggled into Ghana from China.
The logos are the same, and even the standard board logos are even used. Now this is the original Akosombo Textiles print, ATL. Now, sometimes they use the same label, no difference.
Importers smuggle the pirated garments from China in through neighboring countries like Togo. Market workers purchase them, then sell them to consumers at a much lower price than the cloth made in Ghana. China-made fabrics are cheaper because the Chinese government subsidizes the country's textile exports. And since many of the print designs are plagiarized, counterfeiters don't need to pay people to come up with fresh ideas. Abraham Kumsen, leader of the Textiles Workers Union in Ghana, calls the competition unfair. He's been fighting to correct the problem since the late 80s when it began.
I will blame government for bad policies, because it is not only the industry owners that are suffering. The state loses a lot of money. 1, these people evade taxes. 2, they cause massive unemployment.
It's estimated that Ghana loses about 20 million cedis annually due to the illicit textiles. That's $13 million. The government recently responded by setting up a task force made up of leaders in the industry, including Kumsen. He and his team are hoping to weed the problem out by burning illegal garments they seize from shop owners. Shops like this one in Accra, Ghana's capital city, have closed down as a result.
Some Ghanaian shop owners say they should be allowed to sell made-in-China textiles because they're almost half the price of textiles made in factories in Ghana.
A reduction in the price of textiles can only happen if the Ghanaian government is willing to subsidize the industry, but that seems unlikely. In the meantime, Gideon Ashiagbor and thousands of others are left wondering what the future holds.
I have my wife and my children, and I'm taking care of them. ATL is paying me to take care of them. So if ATL should close down and I go home, it will be very difficult. We are praying it shouldn't happen. But if it should happen and we get home, it will be very, very difficult.
For Independent Sources, Abby Ashola.
In this next piece, Abby traveled to Nigeria to examine the country's skyrocketing orphan population. She profiled a pair of siblings who are trying to play their part in addressing the issue by studying an orphanage.
Joy Idris always has her hands full here at the Oyiza Orphanage in Ibadan, Nigeria. The 25-year-old lives here and runs the facility along with her 27-year-old brother, Ige. While most young adults their age are out exploring life, they've accepted the responsibility of taking care of 38 children, including babies and teenagers.
Sometimes I meet people who say, "What are you doing there? What do you mean? You're a big girl. Go out there, hand over the vision to one old woman and live your life." So it's challenging because I don't have my time to myself.
It's a challenge her mother, Dr. Oyiza Adenuga, first welcomed when she started the orphanage back in 2006. 1 year later, Dr. Adenuga fell ill and died suddenly. Joy and Ige didn't hesitate to continue their mother's mission, even if it meant forfeiting college.
Who knows what these children might become tomorrow? So we have to, I and my sister have to sacrifice our lives so that the children, we cater for the children within our limited capacity.
Oyiza Orphanage is just one among a growing number in Nigeria that is trying to address the country's ballooning population of helpless children. In 2010, Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan announced that there are over 7 million orphans and vulnerable children in the country. That's almost half the child population here. Back in 2007, Nigeria's government launched a detailed $1.6 billion plan of action to address the issue, but little has been done since.
I know that in the last few years, this may sound totally pathetic, we have provided them, not even all of them, with at least 50 to 100,000 naira, right, periodically. And when I say periodically, I'm talking like biannually, which is close to nothing.
100,000 naira works out to be less than about $700 spent locally here in Oyo State, where Oyiza is based. It's a drop in the bucket when you consider the size of the problem.
Here at Iwo Road in Ibadan, you'll find some of Nigeria's 7 million plus orphans and vulnerable children hawking food items and begging for money.
Children exposed to the streets are prime targets for child traffickers and kidnappers. The dangers don't stop there.
Some of the teenagers, they get impregnated by the street boys. And the one that are made among the children that are hawking on the street, they come in contact with those street children by engaging them in taking Indian hemp, smoking weed.
Ige says it's a daunting issue, so he and Joy focus on the children they've taken in. With little help from the government, they survive mainly on the goodwill of generous Nigerians.
There was a time there's no food, nothing. These kids were crying, holding on to me, "Mommy, no food." And I was like, what am I going to do? I was crying. But there's always a way out. Sometimes when we got to that very critical stage, somebody will just come in. It may be very small, but that moment it will meet that need.
Joy has found some stability in this whirlwind mission. She recently returned to school where she just completed her second year in a 5-year nursing program. Ige says he will start school again once Joy is finished. In the meantime, he continues to alter his personal life for the sake of the children.
I have a fiancé. I'm preparing to get married. Like I tell my fiancé, you marry me, you marry the kids before marrying me.
For Independent Sources, Abby Ishola.
Still to come, the lighter side of gentrification.
My name's Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Rich?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Finally, from us tonight, we'll revisit some filmmakers with a different approach to tackling the issue of gentrification in Brooklyn.
The creators of the web series East Willie B have taken to using comedy to talk about the changes in their neighborhood.
Producer Judith Escalona filed this report.
You're looking at a good 600 square feet of prime real estate.
This is Bushwick. Your ad said Williamsburg.
East Williamsburg. Yo, I'm trying to sell fly clothing, man, not crack between you and me.
Gentrification is many things to many people, but funny? It is for the creators of East Willoughby, a comedy web series set in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn, a place where hipsters and corporate types are transforming the old Latino working class neighborhood. Julia Grobe is one of the creators and also acts in the series.
Yamin, my co-creator, and I, who've known each other since high school, got together. We're both living in Brooklyn. We're both Latinos, and we wanted, I think we shared a frustration with the types of Latino stories that were being told in media, and specifically film and television. And we wanted to create an alternative story that we felt like spoke more strongly to the actual current realities of urban Latinos living in New York City.
Yo, y'all need to stop talking that sports shit.
Shut up, bro.
Ain't nobody like baseball anymore, man.
A cross between Cheers and Do the Right Thing, the show takes place in a local bar where the owner and a colorful array of characters exchange barbs and warily speculate about their changing neighborhood.
Baseball's average attendance was like 28,750 something. That's in 162 games. That means that 4 million people were watching baseball.
Oh my God, Willie, you just put me to sleep.
Deben de poner el fútbol.
What?
You should put the soccer on, man.
For Yamin Siegel, co-creator and director of East Willoughby, the challenge is keeping it real throughout all the episodes.
Every character you see on television and film is going to be a stereotype of one or another, but there's a certain truth to stereotypes. And I think what we do here very successfully in this new season is really mine our characters so that, yes, perhaps they start at something you've seen before, but they really expand into a character that is dynamic and will show you this next generation Latino that's grown up in the United States, that's English dominant, and that has an identity unto themselves.
The young producers have received great feedback from their audience, recently raising $50,000 online. They've also invited award-winning playwright Cándido Tirado to join their writing team. He grew up in the South Bronx and saw how that neighborhood was gentrified.
Doing a series about that and about people in the neighborhood, and it shows how important these people are and the lives they have and the complexity of lives. And of course, this is also a comedy, so you gotta have comedic elements. And I haven't seen a Latino show that has had that and not being stereotypical.
I was drinking that.
Not anymore, bro.
Flaco Navaja, a former singer in the Latin band Yerba Buena, plays the owner of the bar. He recently had a leading role in Baby Girl that screened this year at the Tribeca Film Festival.
What drew me to this project not only was the passion that they had in the endeavor, but also how organized and how legit it felt. You know, it wasn't a group of friends saying, we got this funny idea, let's do it and put it on YouTube. It was kind of like, we're gonna really do something that has never been done before.
The creative team is expanding East Willoughby's stories and deepening its characters for the new fall season, seeking to stay relevant to the show's viewers and the issues they care about while making them laugh.
You guys want to watch sports? You watch baseball, okay? Last I checked, Bushwick is still Puerto Rican.
Watch it.
Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
You whiter than milk, yo.
Half Mexican, half Cuban. Beats being full retard.
Funny.
That's it for our special look back at some of our favorite segments from last year.
We'll see you again next week for new stories from the city's ethnic and immigrant communities.
Until then, be independent-minded.